China Global Television Network.
Ghana mourns the death of former President Jerry Rawlings, who died at 73. Ethiopia claims victory in fighting in West Tigray as Parliament lifts immunity rights for 39 legislators. And Chinese President Xi Jinping reiterates calls for joint efforts to combat the coronavirus pandemic. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. We'll bring you the details on those stories in just a moment, but first, here's Rama Nyang with the day's business headlines. Rama.
That's right, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in the course of the hour. Tunisia's authorities are quantifying economic losses attributable to the pandemic at nearly $3 billion so far. And South Africa's manufacturing sector is making some gains. Output is up by over 3% in the month of September. We'll be taking a look at the data from all over the continent in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. Tributes have been pouring in for former Ghanaian President Jerry John Rawlings. The African Union Commission Chairman Musa Faki Mahamat described him as a charismatic continental statesman. According to several Ghanaian media, he died Thursday morning at the Kolebu University Hospital in Accra, where he had been admitted a week earlier. CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai reports from Accra.
The former president, Jerry John Rawlings, died on Thursday at the age of 73. According to a family member, he was receiving treatment for an undisclosed illness at the Kolebu Teaching Hospital and had been there for almost a week. There has been outpouring of grief from Ghanaians on the news.
I asked my brother 3 times, as Rawlings died, he said yes. So I was shocked that I heard that thing.
I'm saddened by his death. Rawlings was a good president and loved people.
It touches my heart that where he's gone. He has done enough for this country. We cannot talk about this country without Rawlings.
Jerry John Rawlings led a military coup which overthrew the then government in Ghana in 1981. He later contested democratic elections in 1992 and won. He was in power for 8 years. Many Ghanaians say he was one of the most charismatic leaders the country has had. Nabil Ahmed Rufai, CGTN, Accra, Ghana.
Let's now speak to Dr. Etsi Sikanku, a political analyst from the Ghana Institute, who's joining us via Zoom. Dr. Sikanku, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. Now, some have said that Jerry Rawlings leaves a complicated legacy. How will Ghanaians remember him?
A lot of Ghanaians are going to remember him as one of the longest serving leaders in the country. And so because of that, they are going to remember him as a former president who had a huge impact on the nation. He definitely was in power from 1982 to 92. And then in 92, he won elections. So that's almost 20 years. And so he's the closest, he's the longest serving, not even Nkrumah was in power for that long. So his legacy, his ideas, and his ideologies definitely had an imprint on the lives of Ghanaians. And so because of that, some people definitely saw him as that charismatic leader. Other people probably also saw him as a bit controversial because of how long he's been in power. And when you have been in power for that long, definitely you are likely to have such strong reactions from people. But I think over time, especially after he left government, he transformed into a father figure. And to be honest, he was as close to the opposition party as anybody could be right before his death. There's so much video and pictures of him with the current president, and they do not even belong to the same political party. Yeah, so he assumed a sort of nationalistic figurehead or Figaro in Ghana over time. So if you want to talk about Ghana politics or internally, I think that's really how he transformed over time. And he's the closest to anything we have of a father figure, a patron saint, or a sort of iconic figure, a nationalistic figure. He's the closest to anything that we have in that manner. Sometimes
right, and he has been remembered quite fondly by the Ghanaian president as well, Nana Akufo-Addo, who said today in a statement that a great tree has fallen. He is also being remembered across the continent. So what was the impact of Jerry Rawlings on Ghana's politics in general?
Ghana politics, I mean, his impact cannot be understated. Very, very huge. He started out with a lot of socialist interventions, and so people remember him for rural electrification. People remember him for the grassroots, the AFRC, the PAMSCAD, and for getting a lot of ordinary people involved in the political system. When we're doing the constitution, he said he didn't want it to be made up of just lawyers. He wanted farmers. He wanted hairdressers. He wanted the ordinary people to be part of that particular process. And so he's a pro-poor president who really always wanted the downtrodden and the least in society to be taken up the ladder. So I think that's how people remember him. But then at the end of the day, he was also a military ruler, right? And so there were a lot of those excesses associated with military government that have become an enduring part of his legacy. But across, I mean, the widespread spectrum of Ghana, I think over time he transformed himself into a national figure, and I think that's how people are going to remember him up until the time he died.
All right, Dr. Etsi Sikanku joining us there with the latest on the iconic figure in Ghanaian politics, the late Dr. Jerry Rawlings. Now, Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the country's national defense forces have retaken control of the Western Tigray region. There has been heavy fighting between the federal army and the regional forces loyal to TPLF. The country's parliament, on the other hand, has lifted immunity rights of 39 members of parliament. Most of the members of parliament are from the Tigray region. Here is CGTN's Girum Chala with more details.
Fighting continued overnight and all day today in the north of Ethiopia between the National Defense Force and force loyal to TPLF. And heavy combat has been reported in at least 6 battlefields. On his official Facebook account, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has announced that the Western Tigray region, including the town of Shiraro, has been liberated and is now under the control of the nation's army. He said many crimes have been committed there against members of the Ethiopian National Defense Force who are being held by TPLF's special force. That includes torture and murder. It is still hard to verify some of the information we are getting, and it's impossible to contact any officials in the Tigray region. Phone and internet lines remain cut off. On the other hand, the Ethiopian parliament has lifted immunity rights of 39 members of parliament, including the president of the Tigray regional state, Debretsion Gebremikael. Parliament's latest decision is yet another sign of escalating tensions between the federal government and the regional administration. Grumtala CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Let's shift gears to Tunisia, where parties in the political talks on Libya's future have reached an agreement to hold elections within 18 months. That's according to the United Nations acting Libyan envoy Stephanie Williams. The talks have brought together 75 Libyan participants chosen by the United Nations. CGTN's Nick Mudimba reports.
The meeting has reached preliminary agreement on a roadmap to free, fair, inclusive and credible parliamentary and presidential elections. The UN also says this will also include steps to unite institutions.
They outlined clear steps for reaching these elections, including agreement on a constitutional basis. According to the process they outline, elections will be held in no more than 18 months. The roadmap also outlines steps for uniting Libya's institutions, restoring public services, and to begin a very important process of national reconciliation and transitional justice, and to quickly address the issue of those displaced inside and outside of Libya, who must be allowed to return to their homes in safety and dignity, with guarantees that their rights to housing, land, and properties will be protected.
Libya has been in chaos since 2011 and divided since 2014 between rival factions in the east and west. Major institutions have also split and some are controlled by armed groups ever since the crisis began. The internationally recognized government of National Accord holds power in the capital Tripoli. Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army, on the other hand, holds away in the east. With both sides riven by political, regional and ideological divisions, many Libyans remain skeptical of peacemaking efforts. However, the Tunis talks follow a ceasefire that the GNA and LNA agreed last month in Geneva. The UN says Thursday's talks in Tunis will focus on a new unified transitional government to oversee the run-up to elections. Nick Mudimba, CGTN.
And we move to Cote d'Ivoire, where President-elect Alassane Ouattara and opposition leader Henry Konan Bédié have met as they try to resolve their differences over the recently held elections. The October 31st poll led to conflict in the Francophone nation. The two leaders have been at loggerheads, with Bédié disputing Ouattara's legitimacy as president. Bédié had earlier opposed Ouattara's quest for a third term, calling it unconstitutional. There are hopes that the meeting held in Abidjan will help restore peace in the country. The two leaders have agreed to press ahead with talks to resolve the dispute.
It was a brotherly meeting to restore confidence and to ensure that Ivory Coast finds peace. And we have agreed that peace is the thing that is the most precious to both of us and to all Ivorians. And we have decided to work in that direction, and this was a first meeting, as the president said, to break the ice and establish trust, and we have agreed to meet again very soon in order to continue this dialogue, which has started well and trust has been restored.
I have nothing to add other than that at today's meeting we broke the wall of ice, the silence, and that we will, in the days and weeks to come, we will continue to talk to each other, meet, in order to bring the country back to what it was before. Thank you.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has attended an event celebrating the 30th anniversary of the establishment of Shanghai's Pudong new area. Yang Shengxi briefs us on the key points of his speech.
At the grand gathering, President Xi Jinping delivered a speech centered around further reforms and building what he calls a modern socialist country. He said that over the past 30 years, Shanghai has been a model of China's reform and opening up. He said its success is testament to the strength of the Chinese development path. President Xi also said Pudong should be a pioneer that champions the opening up of other cities along the Yangtze River. The goal is to make Shanghai a global economic, financial, and trade center. So what's next for the area and Shanghai? Now, one of the key focuses for the future of Pudong is innovation. President Xi said it should become an engine of Chinese innovation that benefits the nation's needs and the people's health. To achieve this, the Chinese leader said it's important to invest more efforts into basic and applied research. He said that the objective is to achieve breakthroughs in core technologies, apply them to economic production, and ultimately form world-class industrial clusters. Now, high hopes have been placed in sectors such as integrated circuits, biomedicine, and artificial intelligence. Now, apart from innovation, President Xi also spoke about improving the financial system and business environment, boosting international cooperation, and attracting more international talents to the area. President Xi said the world is going through seismic, once-in-a-century changes, and it's imperative that Pudong's development help the country achieve the dual circulation development pattern. Now, this refers to the domestic economic cycle playing a leading role while the international economic cycle supplements it. Yang Cheng, CGTN, Shanghai.
Now, the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation has been instrumental in the strengthening of Sino-Africa relations in the past years. For more on the impact of the Forum on China-Africa relations, as well as future opportunities for further cooperation, here is international relations expert Ambassador Gert Grobler.
FOCAC has had a major impact on Africa. There has also always been a strong traditional relationship between China and Africa. But when FOCAC was formed in 2000 and in the year 2000, it gave a tremendous push, a tremendous new momentum to relations between Africa and China. In FOCAC is not only a very effective dialogue mechanism, but more importantly, it's a platform to bring about practical, tangible cooperation between China and Africa, which has indeed happened over the last 20 years. We will unpack the progress that's been made with FOCAC, in particular the Beijing plan, where there are 8 major initiatives dealing with industry, dealing with people-to-people cooperation, dealing with infrastructure, to unpack and to see what progress has been made. And of course, in addition to that, as a result of COVID-19, there are additional concerns on the part of Africa, which will also be part of the agenda, and that is the urgent need for the economic recovery of Africa. And in that context, all these issues will be very relevant. Further infrastructure development on the continent, further industrialization of the continent, and of course there are the debt issues. I mean, a lot of fallacies and myths are being spread by the West and by America about debt traps and so forth. But these issues will be discussed in a spirit of mutual trust, in a spirit of a constructive spirit, and a spirit of good faith. So the meeting next year in Senegal will be incredibly important, particularly because of the impact that COVID-19 had on Africa. And of course, China has been at Africa's side all along since the outbreak of COVID, and has been assisting Africa at length.
You're watching Africa Live. Still ahead on the program. Chinese President Xi Jinping reiterates calls for joint efforts to combat the coronavirus pandemic. And how e-commerce is helping deliver much-needed aid to thousands in Somalia.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Chinese President Xi Jinping also delivered a video message to the Paris Peace Forum. This year's event is focusing on a global response to COVID-19. Xi Jinping called for respect for science and joint efforts to combat the pandemic.
The coronavirus is still wreaking havoc around the world. We need to put people and life first, place people's well-being front and center, respect science, and make more targeted and concerted response. We need to give full play to the crucial leadership role of the World Health Organization in facilitating the joint global response against COVID-19. China will continue to share with others experience in containing the virus and expertise in diagnostics and therapeutics, and provide assistance in essential medical supplies.
The global fight against the coronavirus has received a boost after research showed that a vaccine developed by pharmaceutical companies Pfizer and BioNTech is about 90% effective against COVID-19. It is being tested in many parts of the world, including South Africa, where researchers are delighted with this latest development. Here's CGTN's Julie Shire with that report.
The Newtown Clinical Research Lab in South Africa is one of several sites testing a COVID-19 vaccine produced by Pfizer and BioNTech. The country has the highest infection rate on the continent. News that the drug drastically cuts the chances of getting COVID-19 was met with relief.
I am very excited that I've exposed some of our patients to a potential vaccine to this pandemic. We're seeing a second peak taking place in certain areas in the world, and we are worried about a second peak taking place in South Africa in particular. And it creates a lot of hope that a vaccine that will prevent this infection is imminent.
800 people have formed part of the trial. Despite being apprehensive at first, volunteers here are now upbeat.
I'm very, very, very happy that it's going to help us. Maybe the world is going to go back to normal again.
The death rate, maybe it will cease a bit because people are dying. It wasn't fun because we've lost families, we've lost friends, we've lost loved ones. Our brothers, our sisters, it was very much hectic and painful.
The vaccine has so far proven to be safe, but research is ongoing.
In terms of compiling a full set of data that you can submit to the regulators to say, yes, this product is safe, we're a few weeks away from that. In the next couple of months, as more data comes out, exactly how effective it is in those with HIV, in those who have had previous COVID infections, how long immunity lasts.
Pfizer and BioNTech are preparing to produce over 1.3 billion doses over the next year. The vaccine has to, however, be stored in extremely cold temperatures, raising questions around transportation in warmer regions like Africa.
We store this vaccine in a -80 freezer. So it's an ultra low temperature freezer that is not very easy to get. So generally not in your normal households. Probably some public healthcare facilities might not have them. But with that, the next statement has got to do with how people can improve on products to make them more accessible.
This vaccine is so far humanity's best chance of defeating COVID-19. But now it all depends on how quickly it can be made available to the general population. Julie Shara, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
The news this week that a COVID-19 vaccine developed by Pfizer and BioNTech has proven to be largely effective has raised questions over whether it will be available to the world's most vulnerable people. In Africa, health sector stakeholders want the continent to be given priority when vaccines become available. The African Union is putting in place plans to ensure that COVID-19 vaccines reach at least 60% of Africa's population. CGTN's Coletta Wanjohi has more details from Addis Ababa.
A global coalition to ensure the protection of the most vulnerable. Africa's participation in the international collaboration COVAX is meant to ensure it will automatically get 20% of any vaccines that are jointly procured. But it's not enough, according to the African Union.
We are saying that for our continent, given the size, given the nature and the characteristics of our population, we need to get up to that level of 60% to achieve that. We are not the only country or continent aiming for this. Indonesia is aiming at 60%. The UK is aiming at 80% of its immunization. So the 20% there, the logic is clear that the 20% will go to healthcare workers, which is very appropriate. We'll go to the elderly, and we'll also go to those with underlying diseases. But we are saying that in the spirit of protecting the continent, we need to take it that. So that is the gap that we are trying to fill.
According to the World Health Organization, there are currently more than 100 COVID-19 vaccine candidates in development, with a number of these in the human trial phase. The African Union says the continent needs about $12 billion to acquire enough vaccines and invest in its own production.
The Afri-Exim Bank is saying, look, if the continent can raise from its special drawing rights about 1.8 billion, then they can leverage that up to 5 billion. And that will go towards vaccine procurement and delivery as well as manufacturing. We also have to aim past this current pandemic, and with the understanding that there will be another pandemic in future, and we don't want to be scrambling and looking for parties and partners outside of the continent to produce vaccines. We should be capable and able to produce vaccines on the continent.
Meanwhile, the Africa CDC and the World Health Organization are warning of a new wave of infections. The continent's COVID-19 curve shows that between July and September, there was an increase in coronavirus infections. The cases stabilized in September, but now they are increasing again. The continent has so far registered over 1.9 million cases of COVID-19 and over 46,000 deaths. There is a sharp spike in the new infections in Democratic Republic of Congo, Kenya, Nigeria, and Egypt, while Ethiopia and South Africa are beginning to register a decrease. For African officials here, the goal is to ensure that Africa is not ignored in the race for a vaccine. Coletta Njohi, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Well, let's shift focus to Somalia. Years of conflict and the threat of Al-Qaeda-linked Islamists, Al-Shabaab, who are battling to overthrow the government, have left many Somalis dependent on humanitarian assistance. The spread of the coronavirus pandemic in the Horn of Africa nation has for months made it difficult for residents to receive food. But thanks to an application called eShop, the dynamic has changed. CGTN's Wanja Mungai reports.
Muslima Abdirahman is a mother of 9. She claims to have escaped death twice in the past 2 years while shopping for groceries in the capital city of Mogadishu. Mogadishu is prone to terrorist attacks from the Al-Qaeda-linked group, Al-Shabaab, who frequently launch bombings on busy streets and markets in the capital. But thanks to the World Food Programme's humanitarian e-commerce system in Somalia, women like Muslima have traded the dangerous errand for online shopping.
It has become dangerous to go to the shops because we are afraid of catching the coronavirus. We are lucky to get this application. We enjoy online shopping. It saves us a lot of time and we get the food we want.
The newly launched application is part of WFP's global shift from giving out food to cash. The eShop application was launched in 2018 and introduced home delivery in April, a month after COVID-19 hit Somalia. It was originally conceived as a way to protect women in Somalia from security threats. The application has also helped avoid large crowds at aid distribution sites during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Many years ago, when we were handing food, the people accept the food, and you could see in their body language how the dignity wasn't there. Because when you are receiving food, you are without having the opportunity of discuss or challenge, you don't have that strength. And you can see the body language of these beneficiaries have changed now tremendously. Because now with the cash-based assistance that we provide, they are the ones deciding where and what to buy.
The World Food Programme has long used electronic vouchers for distributing cash aid for Syrian refugees. Somalia is the first country to make use of the app and home delivery system. The UN agency hopes to roll out online shopping on another part of the continent. Wanja Mungai, CGTN.
And here's a quick recap of the headlines this hour. Tributes have been pouring in for former Ghanaian President Jerry John Rawlings. The African Union Commission chairperson Musa Faki Mahamat described him as a charismatic continental statesman. According to several Ghanaian media, Rawlings died Thursday morning at the Korle Bu University Hospital in Accra, where he had been admitted a week earlier. Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed says the country's national defense forces have retaken control of the western Tigray region. There has been heavy fighting between the federal army and regional forces loyal to the TPLF there. In another development, the country's parliament has lifted immunity right of 39 members of parliament. Most of the MPs are from the Tigray region. And the Chinese president has delivered a video message at the Paris Peace Forum. This year's event is focusing on a global response to COVID-19. President Xi Jinping called for respect for science and joint efforts to combat the pandemic. And that's a look at your headlines. Well, let's now go to Ram Manyang for a look at the latest business news, Rama.
That's right, Beatrice. Here's what's coming up in business. Tunisia's authorities estimate that the pandemic has cost the economy nearly $3 billion and counting. And manufacturing in South Africa is making a bit of gains. Output is up by over 3% in September.
This has taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time, it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Let's start in North Africa. The government in Tunisia is warning that the North African state is going through a difficult and unprecedented economic crisis. It says losses attributable to the ongoing pandemic have reached at least $2.9 billion so far this year. Authorities say to expect the COVID-19 crisis to continue for at least another 24 months. CGTN's Adin Chachi has the details from Tunis.
Prime Minister Hisham Meshishi said that all economic sectors have been affected by the pandemic, which has hammered the tourism-dependent economy. Consequently, tensions are reaching boiling point over rising poverty and unemployment.
The economic situation is very difficult. Our country has never experienced such a deep economic and social crisis. This is not only due to the repercussions of the coronavirus pandemic, it's also the result of accumulated problems. For several years now, and since 2011, Tunisia was unable to find the right economic model. Consequently, we could not give hope to the people. Illegal migration and unemployment are on the rise because the population is desperate.
The Prime Minister added that boosting the economy will take up to 2 years. In the meantime, the government will initiate the necessary structural, economic and social reforms. Otherwise, economic growth and development will be slow in the North African state, whose economy is expected to contract by more than 8% this year.
The coronavirus crisis has paralyzed the economy for several months. The general lockdown in March and April made the economy's restart even more complicated. That's why we are thinking of concrete solutions. But first, we must stop the economic hemorrhage and understand what's wrong in order to initiate structural reforms.
Economists argue that the authorities need to evaluate the post-pandemic economic situation and come up with a roadmap for recovery. The Prime Minister's economic advisors assert that the government's priorities that need to be addressed as part of the Finance Law 2021 are mainly controlling the drain on public finances, restoring investor confidence, protecting jobs, supporting the health system and assisting small and medium-sized enterprises. Members of the Tunisian Employers Organization and senior economists have called on the head of state and the Prime Minister to declare a state of economic emergency in order to save public finances and the national economy and to avoid social and political unrest. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Egypt's government aims to raise the industrial sector share of GDP to at least 20%. A report released by the state back in August showed that the sector accounted for about 17% or so of economic output while directly employing 180,000 people. Now, while the authorities see manufacturing as a key component for future growth, local entrepreneurs face a whole range of challenges in scaling up their businesses. As CGTN's Yasser Hakim now reports, businessmen over there argue that they're drowning in red tape.
Industrial investments in Egypt stand at $4 billion, but experts say it's a low amount considering what Egypt has to offer.
Geographically, Egypt has a very important geographical area that can serve Africa, Asia and Europe. All the industries they have a good potential here in Egypt. In the last 3-5 years, a lot of improvement have been done, especially to eliminate all the obstacles and the bureaucracy that have been used to be in the past years.
However, there are still some hurdles facing local and foreign investors.
Egypt is better than other countries in procedures for industrial investment. The new one-stop shop has facilitated the process by 90%, but there are still difficulties with finding industrial land to set up a factory, as well as receiving licenses and registrations to begin operation.
The government assigned the Industrial Development Authority to study the issues and provide solutions for investors.
I found that there are about 15 procedures needed to receive the license, and each procedure takes time. Same with registration. This is a setback for any investor. We are currently reducing it to a maximum 3 steps. We are also introducing automation. We are creating an automated database for land availability, licensing and industrial registration. Once ready, it will speed up the process for investors.
Al-Zallat says he's also working on improving infrastructure on industrial land, another concern for investors. He said, unlike before, the budget is now available to finish the belated infrastructure projects for the factories and plants. There's been focus on small and medium enterprises as well.
16 industrial complexes are under construction around the country to serve small and medium enterprises. 3 are ready and operating. An investor would choose the location and project they would establish inside the complex and receive the license immediately to start work.
Facilities will be offered such as land for free or 50% discounts on cost of production. The aim is to encourage youth and small businessmen to venture into the small and medium enterprises and add value to the industrial sector. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Still on manufacturing, but this time in South Africa. The country's seasonally adjusted manufacturing output was up by 3.2% month-on-month in September. That comes in the wake of month-on-month changes of 3.3% in August and 5.6% in July. Here's CGTN's Angela Coppola examining the data.
Seasonally adjusted manufacturing production increased by 32.9% in the third quarter of 2020 compared with the second quarter. All 10 manufacturing divisions reported positive growth rates over that period.
We're probably going to see the biggest bounce back ever of manufacturing in the third quarter. It's probably going to be over 100%. Increase on the quarter before. However, we must just keep in mind that this is the 16th consecutive month of year-on-year decline.
The steel and metals industry is feeling a little bit more positive than during the previous month.
So from our side, I think it's positive news because we're seeing a little bit of uptick in terms of production base. The only concern we have is that if you look at the data and categorize it according to the segments, you will find that it remains a pressurized environment in terms of what's happening within the metal industry.
There is other data that is suggesting to analysts that the country may have turned a corner.
PMI seems to be on the upward trajectory. Looking at the data that came out last month as well, I think we're also seeing a little bit of a peak in terms of business confidence, which is quite positive for us. Capacity utilization, I can say, remains quite weak.
Looking ahead, South Africa remains in a precarious position, especially in the auto sector.
The other thing is we know already that world car sales are down and that the car parks of dealers all around the world are full. And I think next year, the orders for South African manufactured cars will not be as high.
The manufacturing data is pointing in the right direction. Now it's a question of increasing that percentage growth increase for the country's economy and employing more people. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And finally, Tokyo is home to the largest fish market on the planet. And trade there has been hit pretty badly amidst this pandemic. This, however, is just the latest in a series of obstacles for the Toyosu market. It opened its doors to the public back in 2018. Shop owners over there say the future is looking increasingly grim. Grace Lee takes up that story.
After months of coronavirus hiatus, Toyosu Fish Market's tuna auction is back on public display. It's been a staple of the market long before it was called Toyosu. 2 years ago, the market underwent a costly $5 billion move from Tokyo's historic Tsukiji district to this much larger location outside the city center. Since then, it's been an uphill battle for the some 600 merchants who moved with it.
In terms of operation, there are more cons than pros. Access is really bad. By public transport, it takes twice as much time to get here than it would to get to our old location.
Then COVID-19 came along, halving sales for businesses that were already struggling. Seafood consumption in Japan has been steadily declining, and the new site came with complications too. Once home to a gas plant, toxic substances were found in the soil and groundwater at Toyosu before launch. Additional cleanup measures meant more costs and a longer delay before the big move. But experts say the relocation was necessary.
The buildings and the facilities in Tsukiji were simply getting too old, and though little fixes were made to maintain the market, a significant overhaul wasn't possible because it was such a crucial market that needed to be working every day. Toyosu fulfills the global standards of hygiene and supply, so I think it was right to move the market there.
Back in Tsukiji, restaurants and retail shops left behind are still coping with the aftermath too. With the wholesale market gone, foot traffic has cut down significantly.
After the market moved to Toyosu, we've been getting about 1/3 the usual amount of customers.
Merchants here say COVID-19 has felt like a nail in the coffin.
I can't even put into words how defeated we feel by the coronavirus. If only this didn't exist, we were still getting by despite the market moving.
Their only hope is that Japan opens its doors to international travelers soon, so that badly needed tourists can help revive the markets. Grace Lee, CGTN, Tokyo.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. I'll be back at the top of the hour, however. In global business, fixed income is going to be our focus. Egypt, for one, is sending to green bonds to boost investment in sustainable projects. We'll also be taking a closer look at Zambia's default. That's during the next 24 hours. All that and more is coming up shortly on Global Business. For now, back to Beatrice.
Rama, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. Meet the 64-year-old woman artist breaking molds in conservative northern Nigeria.
Join us in Global Business and see Africa through our eyes.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kanata, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
You're watching breaking news on CGTN.
Welcome to the world today on CGTN.
Many girls worldwide face obstacles in their pursuit of careers that are considered male-dominated, but this is slowly changing. In northern Nigeria, one female artist is using art to change the narrative in a part of the country where the girl child is hardly given a voice and gender bias is high. Deji Badmus has that story.
All habits, they say, die hard. At 64, Bintu Garba is still very active in painting like she was over 30 years ago when she started out as a first female artist in her tertiary institution in Kano State, northwest Nigeria. It's not common to find a female artist in northern Nigeria, with hardly any at her age. And the well-known culture painter's journey to the world of art dates back to her early childhood.
When I was a child, I used to draw. By then, I didn't know what painting was. Then my uncle, he now took us to London. That's where I saw paintings of master's paintings, very beautiful ones at the National Gallery of Art in England. So from there on, I just love painting and I pick up interest from there. Because I noticed after every painting, a painter will now inscribe his name at the bottom of the painting.
Over the years, she's made a name for herself and gained acceptance from a society that was initially reluctant to give her that recognition. Her works dwell mainly on her culture and environment.
My painting is mostly culture and educative as well. Anytime we hold an art exhibition, I do sell painting, and besides, when I was in school, visitors used to come and buy my paintings. That is why I lost count of my painting. Then I didn't know I should be counting them. As I'm working, people tend to come in and appreciate the work. Some, by then, I even used to give it free of charge. But much later now, I come to realize that every piece of my painting is like a child to me.
Garba has had to scale huge cultural barriers to attain success in a society where the girl child enjoys only limited opportunities and female artists are rare. Being a poster girl for defying cultural barriers, she now deploys her skill to train the younger generation.
In my studio, I allow teenagers to come. I teach them painting free of charge. Some of them, all they do is to buy the materials themselves. And then I do teach them, I do coach them. Since it is what I've been doing for over 30 years now, so I now find it easier to even teach anyone that is even interested in painting.
These days, Garba spends most of her time advocating increased acceptance of arts in northern Nigeria. For her, painting is not just drawing, but a way of life.
The Society of Nigerian Artists were making people understand the value of art. Now people are buying art and decorating their houses. If you go around Kano, you will see that there are places that are decorated with paintings. Even the government now, they do commission artists to come and do paintings in strategic places. Even in hospitals, like now we have this COVID-19 around, you need to see the kind of illustration painters are doing to make it easier for people to understand what they should do and what not to do.
With Garba's inspiring story, many more girls in the north of the country are now gaining courage and venturing into the arts without fear. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Kano, Northwest Nigeria.
And time now for a quick look at your sports news. Here's what's ahead. South Africa forced into squad changes for Sao Tome 2021 AFCON qualifiers by positive COVID-19 cases.